Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today's video I am going to be explaining to you how I went from a liberal and totally Democrat environmentalist who I protested like pipelines and all kinds of stuff. In fact, I still have a no Dakota Access Pipeline sticker on my pickup, but how I went from that to becoming a logger. And I just want to share what I've learned in working in the timber industry and what I've learned about environmentalism, especially in my state, because I've seen quite a bit. I grew up here in Oregon. So I wanted to share my unique perspective, having come from a very liberal background, and you know what I've learned and what I believe now to be good forest practices. So yeah, I was a total liberal environmentalist, and I think a lot of environmentalists are probably environmentalists for the same reasons that I was, because you love nature, you want to be good to the things around you, and yeah, I mean, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with those things. So I think a lot of people are misled into the environmental movement with misinformation and lies, blatant lies, because what I understood prior to being in the timber industry was a lot of just wrong, false information. So, Oregon is a state with really rugged and hardy individuals, and there's a lot of people here out in the woods that would be able to survive off the land and do survive off the land, and they hardly go into, civilization or to the stores for any kind of supplies because they are able to live off of the land. So that in Northern California, and I hear Montana is much the same way. I know there's a few other parts of the country that are like that, and I know even down in where is it? The Ozarks, I think, is where they're actually starting a whole off-grid like community that is made to be like sort of like the last stand of freedom where everybody's supposed to go. So I know that there's already, these movements going on because there's a lot of individuals in this country that are very rugged. I mean, our ancestors, just like 3 generations back, were the ones that established much of, well, maybe great-great-grandparents, but it's not that far back in many of our family lines that those people established very raw wilderness and pioneered through some very thick forests to even establish and colonize, this great country of ours. But and I have a couple friends. I have some logger friends who are like 5th generation, and so it was like their grandparents, great-great-grandparents were the ones coming over and actually, taming the wilderness, so to speak. And those men were very hardy men. I mean, they were shipbuilders and loggers. I mean, these men really did some amazing things. So, I got off track of where I was headed with the generational thing. But, and I think that there were, because we really cut down a lot of amazing trees. But the thing about good forest practices is that you have to get rid of dead and dying and diseased. And fire is actually a big part of that. Fire is a big part, especially of the pine tree. There are some pines that pine seeds that won't even germinate until they are burned with fire. Like, it takes that, and it's that burning with fire that germinates. It also kills any of the diseases and bugs that might have been coming with it, and just that whole charcoal experience makes it the environment that these seeds need to germinate. So fire has always been a part of, just like living in Oregon. We've always had a lot of forest fires, but generally they weren't in areas of populace. Not right now, in a little bit. Finish your chores. So it's just been within the last 10 years that the forest fires in Oregon have gotten really bad. And I plan to explain to you guys from my perspective why. I believe this was a planned destruction of the forest. Oh, I remember what I was talking about, generation. So all these people that they're not able to control, they can only control the minds of the masses in these like cities where it's like breeding, because it's a cultural thing. This whole mind control, the mass hypnosis, it only works if you have the whole society that is like pressuring these individuals that aren't thinking along the party lines, or they're not, going with the program. Well, you have these additional pressures, you have family pressures, so they're intending to use all of this against us. Like, oh, we all, realize that we're a part of a totally pagan and wicked culture, but, we're Christians, but, it's our grandma always did it, and we can't, hurt our grandma's feelings. She's so sweet, and we don't want to stop doing these pagan holidays because we don't want to offend grandma, and she's so wonderful. So it's these family pressures. They've built the culture like this so that everything around us pushes us to where they want us to go. So these people that live out in the woods and don't get any of the propaganda, they may not even have TV, they may not even have internet to even like be connected to all of what they're trying to do to us psychologically. So the country people are much less likely to be brainwashed, and they're also much more rugged and hardy. So what are you going to do with these wild men of the woods? Well, I believe they plan to burn the woods and burn us out so that we wouldn't feel comfortable to even have property out in the woods because of the fires. So this is why I believe this. This is why I believe that this was planned to destroy the forests, to get the people out of the forests so that we were no longer surviving off the land and living off the land and would have to survive off of a government. So in the 90s in Oregon, the environmentalists had a real soft spot for this owl called the spotted owl. No coincidence that the owl is a very occult, Freemasonic symbol. No coincidence, right? So literally this spotted owl pretty much shut down logging in our state. It took it almost to a complete halt. And this was in the 90s. Now, what I saw, I wasn't in the logging industry or the timber industry. I didn't know anybody, so I didn't really understand from their side what was happening. But I did see all the mills in my hometown get closed down, and obviously I saw the impact of that, and so I knew that the environmental ideas negatively impacted American or Oregonian businesses and industry. So that was about all I knew as a kid. And then as I grew up and started looking at like the pipeline, that was really one of the main things, that environmental issue anyways, that was brought to my attention. And Paul and I, my husband, had discussed this pipeline issue, because I'm like, they can't just put their pipelines through these native people's lands. It was going through, like a native part of their land, like through a river. It would have polluted, it would have done damage if it exploded. So my heart was for the people, and like, these Native Americans are protesting. I think we should at least sit back and listen to what they have to say. But that gave me, started having me look at the fossil fuels issue, and the whole carbon thing. So then I get into logging, and they start to try to force through. Now the Democrats, this was in 2018, I believe, the Democrats had a supermajority in the Senate. So basically the governor, who was also Democratic with the supermajority, were able to shove through a bunch of laws that they didn't have to get our vote on. Are you done with your chores? Are you done with your chores? Yeah. So this was in 2018. We had just started our logging business, and the supermajority in Oregon was trying to shove through this cap and trade bill, which basically said how much carbon that you could emit. And they had a whole credit system where they were actually going to auction off these carbon credits. Okay, auction off. That means it goes to the highest bidder. Well, if you have a tiny little logging outfit like me and Paul, and then you have Weyerhaeuser, who are billionaires backed by literally generations of billions of dollars and millions of acres all over the country. I mean, this family, the Weyerhaeusers, established, see, all these major industries that our whole culture and society is built on were established in the 1800s by all of these families that were all part of the Skull and Bones Society. So they have written our culture to be what they want it to be. So if they're going to auction off these carbon credits, guess who's got all the money and who's going to probably just buy all of the carbon credits? That's right, the basically conglomerate of the timber industry, Weyerhaeuser. So then what's going to happen? Well, then maybe once they're done using up all their credits, maybe they can resell them to you later for a profit. So you're putting these small businesses out of business. And mind you, this does not solve the carbon issue. Okay, so this plan and bill did not reduce carbon. So if their real issue was environmental, why did they not have a plan to reduce carbon? So in 2018, because this bill was being shoved through and would have affected my business, because it all has to do with your equipment and machines, and all of our equipment was old. So if you can afford to get the brand newest machines, well, they put all of these, emissions, blah, 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 on your machines. But if you have an older machine, because that's all you can afford, well, now you have a lot more emissions because they're not up to code. So you're now putting out more emissions. You either need to upgrade your equipment or you need to pay for some carbon credits. This was the clown show. Yes? Okay. Have you finished your chore? Okay. I don't want to talk to you about anything until you've done what I've asked you to do. We're in the final home stretch here, folks. Sabbath is tomorrow, so hopefully we'll get all of our stuff done. So anyways, so these carbon credits. So because this would have directly affected my business, there was a whole caravan of log trucks that had decided they were going to storm the Capitol, like drive up to Salem. There were thousands of log trucks in 2018. It was amazing. It was amazing. Or no, maybe it was 2019. I think it might have been the summer of 2019. So when I went up to Salem, and we went in a whole caravan behind a bunch of log trucks coming from the coast, and it took all day long. It was the craziest. We blockaded. So Salem's the capital, and we literally drove to the Capitol, and we drove by where they were having all of these, meetings and stuff. And what happened at the time is the Republican senators actually went into hiding because they were trying to shove all these bills through that Oregon over and over and over has voted down. But because they had the supermajority, they decided, oh, now's the time. We're just going to vote all these through. Well, the Republican senators decided to go into hiding because if they weren't there, then they couldn't push through any of the proceedings. They couldn't even have, they couldn't even do anything without the Republicans there. So they all went into hiding. Governor Brown threatened to try to get the cops to go find them, and the cops were like, we're not helping you. So, I mean, this has just been this huge battle between Oregon politics and Oregonians for a while now. And this Governor Brown's awful. So anyway, so I drive up there, and out of the Capitol comes running to me this woman, and she was in tears, and she just was thanking me, and she was like, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming here. Like, you guys have no idea what we've been up against for the last 2 months. She goes, this has nothing to do with carbon. She goes, the Republicans have a reconnected notice. Reconnection successful. Are we back on? So I think my stream got interrupted, so I'm just going to repeat what I said. So the woman that came running out of the City Hall was like, we've put forward multiple bills that would reduce carbon, and every single one they shot down. This is about money. This bill is all about money and them making money on the carbon. And she was just in tears and just was so thankful that we were up there doing that. So that was when I really started pondering environmentalism in general, and what was right and what was right and what was wrong. And I remember when I was looking at growing really, really, really big plants and trying to grow really big plants, one of the things that I heard you could do is you could pump carbon monoxide you could pump CO2, pump carbon into your greenhouse, and your plants are going to grow bigger. Okay, so trees eat carbon and emit oxygen. So please tell me how carbon is bad for the environment when that is what they eat. Okay, so that's when I realized that all of this was a lie, and they literally had been overgrowing the forests, purposefully saying, we're not going to cut because we love the environment and it's better if we just leave it. No, that's not true. If you leave an environment, it grows fuel, underbrush. The dead underbrush is fuel for a fire. So if you don't log and you don't even do any kind of forest maintenance or forestry, and you just literally leave it be, which is what we've been doing since the 90s, then what you have is a major problem on your hands, because you have no access roads because the loggers haven't been going in there clearing the roads out. Trees grow everywhere. They grow up through the logging roads unless you send the loggers in there to log parts of it. This is how you pay for the roads. You pay to put roads in all the forests by logging parts of it, and that pays for it. There's no other economical or financially feasible way to build these access roads or, without logging parts of it. So they've allowed overgrowth in the forests so that there's no access and there is a ton of underbrush debris. Now, if you have a fire in a forest, you have about 1 year to get that logged. That wood is still valuable and can still be used within that first year. Now, if you go much beyond that, depending on weather, you are going to have bug problems and beetle infestations, and the wood is no longer usable. So the way that the Forest Service and BLM, the way that they have these, tons of red tape for all of their log sales, it takes over a year for a burned forest to even be available for someone to bid on to log that. So sometimes they might be able to get it within a year. They have been successful at getting some of it out, but they're not maintaining it properly. If a forest burns, that whole thing should be logged within the year, period. Because by not logging it, now you have dead forest that's just drying out, bug infested. You have another lightning bolt come through and you've sparked that hole. That's just waiting that's kindling, waiting to spark another forest fire. So I believe we should take our lands back from the federal government, from BLM and the Forest Service, because they have mismanaged the forests so horribly and caused a buildup of debris and fuel in the forest that are now exacerbating the forest fire problem. And it's literally just burning our state down. This is planned destruction. This is planned destruction against us. In 2020, I had multiple eyewitness reports from friends of mine all over the state that saw with their own eyes people starting fires in city limits. And even in Coos Bay, there was people starting fires. And every single one of them said when they addressed the person, that the person turned around and had a maniacal grin on their face and started laughing. So, I mean, this is obviously a demonic attack. These are people that have left themselves open to demonic attachments and even connections, and allowing themselves to be used as a tool of the enemy. But I wanted to share what I've learned about forest practices. And I think biodiversity is great. I do think that Weyerhaeuser has an amazing system for their tree farms. Like, they have it, just because they're the enemy doesn't mean they haven't, they don't have a good organizational plan, because they start from one end and they have it so that you log the whole thing, and by the time you're done logging the land, you have another 60 years and you can start from the beginning and start over. So they do have a great system for logging. I know that they're great to work for because of that. They have a very high standard of safety. I would just have, the only thing I would do differently is have more biodiversity. So, but that's all controlled by, they're a conglomerate. They're the billionaires, and then you have like the little guys like me and my husband that were trying to log. We were taking all the risk upon ourselves. We were doing all of the work. So you have the most dangerous job, which is cutting the trees down and getting them to the truck. Okay, that's the most of the work in logging, is cutting the tree down and getting it to the truck. Once it's to the truck, you drive it to the mill, which is a very easy job, and then the whole factory, most of these factories are fully automated now. Fully automated. You have a few guys that run the whole factory. And that's what they'd like to get the whole industry. Every industry is trying. They're trying to force, this is the way they, the transhuman agenda. They don't want people anymore. They want robots to do all the work for us. And in the name of security, people are going to go along with it and say, yeah, this does sound really safe. But let me tell you what, the loggers that we produced at the turn of the century in the 1800s, those men were real men. The loggers nowadays, unless they're older, the loggers nowadays are a bunch of pansies. Yeah, my friend Nate, who's, he was my husband's best friend, and he worked with us in our logging business, and he told me one of the loggers was like, heard a sound in the woods and was all freaked out, like, oh, did you hear something? I mean, these guys, because it's all, they literally have a whole automated yarder now with grapples that have a camera on them so that you can run it from your remote control in your living room, and then they have a excavator that takes that line and just moves it to the next section, and then you go up and down with your grapples and pull them all up. So yeah, they're trying to fully automate everything, but I appreciate the old ways. Yes, they might be harder, but the Bible tells us to strive to live a simple and quiet life. And so that is what I am doing. I'm working hard to live a simple life. Because the simple life that I build is not going to be dependent on the rest of the world coming crashing down. And, that's the problem, is once we have all of these, once we become accustomed to, everything coming from the store and the market and everything, having your water on the city water and your power, I mean, you're dependent on them. So what if the grid goes down? And what if they're, you know, what if the stores, inflation causes your food prices to go up by 4? So there's all of these things that other people are controlling about our lives. And I believe that's why the Bible says, come out of her and be separate, because he does not want us to be dictated by evil men. And there's a lot of evil men in power right now. And so I no longer want my life to be dictated by evil men. And that's why I am totally goal driven and focused on building my life to be the way that I want it. And, you know, taking authority of my life back. Taking back authority. That's something I believe we all need to do, is take back authority in our lives. You know, I got a call today by someone who I think was a very unhealthy relationship, and was a good thing that they weren't in my life, even though it was also hurtful that they weren't in my life. But that person called and said a bunch of rude and mean things and tried bossing me around, even though I haven't spoke with them in years. I don't even know, like, they didn't even ask me about my life before proceeding to give me advice on what I was doing wrong. So it just reminded me, you know, that there is a reason that God removes certain things and certain people from your lives, and not to resent it. You know, I mean, I used to get so hurt in all my friendships because I felt like I wasn't, you know, they didn't like me enough, or I just felt like I was heartbroken a lot in friendships, that I wanted to be friends with people that didn't want to be friends with me. And there's a lot of freedom that comes to really not caring anymore. Who likes you, who says what, and who thinks what. And that's the place where I'm at now, where I've chosen to, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Everybody else can go do whatever else they want. And I don't care. I've never been the type of person to try to get somebody to change, to, you know, why do I care what somebody else does? So I don't care. Everybody else can become Satanists and witches, and, you know, though that's sad to me, and I believe they're slaves, you know, it's their choice. It's their choice, and they have the freedom to do that. So as for me and my house, we choose to serve the Lord, and I no longer care what anybody says about any of it. You know, I used to be so controlled by my family and what they thought of me, because I wanted them to think, you know, whatever of me. But you know what I found out is that what people think of you really says more about them, especially if what they think of you isn't true. And so I've been learning to just let go of all of those things that control us. These are the social systems that the devil has set up to literally control us. And I feel a lot of freedom in not really caring what anybody thinks or what anybody says, other than God. You know, he's the only opinion that matters anymore. And I'm not afraid to make my boundary very clear. And I don't care who it pushes out. If you don't want to respect my boundaries, then you don't have to be here. You don't have to be here. But I'm done making compromises and allowing people within my boundaries that don't respect what they are, or what my boundaries are, or or me. So, you know, and that's because I have to teach my kids these things. And if I don't live them out, then they're going to learn the bad habits that I wasn't able to overcome. So, anyways, kind of jabbering on today. So, forest practices, I am super excited. I just germinated. I wanted to show you guys pictures of my germinated trees, but I'm so proud of myself. I finally germinated some little seedlings and am very excited because that worked out really good and fast. They germinated in like a month rather than 3 or 4 months. So I'm very excited. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on for myself and my business for the next school year. Is I'm going to be really focusing on my garden and the nursery and getting that business up and running. Hopefully apply for some grants through the government, since I will be a women-owned agricultural business. So I think there's a lot of stuff that I can take advantage. So wish me luck, folks, or pray for me would be even better, because I don't believe in luck. But I do believe in the blessings of God, and I know He will pour them out. So thanks for listening to my tree rant. I miss my dad. He passed away quite a few years ago. And I actually meant to do this on Father's Day to honor my husband, but it's just been a very emotional month and summer. So miss you, Dad. Love you, Dad. Everybody grow trees and have